We're going to start in China, and then we're going to work our way back to the United States because we've been, it seems like almost every other episode this month, China has entered the conversation in terms of the economic slowdown. And today we get to add NVIDIA to the growing list of companies in the United States warning shareholders about China. NVIDIA reports earnings on Valentine's Day, but came out this morning and said they expect quarterly revenue to come in around $2.2 billion. That is down from $2.7 billion. That's a drop. That is not just a step down. That is a drop. And shares of NVIDIA, when we walked in the studio, down 12%.
Yeah, I almost feel like for NVIDIA, China is a scapegoat in this sense. Well,
really?
Yes, without a doubt. So there definitely is going to be a pullback in gaming revenue from China because China's regulations and current economic state. I mean, of course, we're going to see negative effects. But think about how much they reduced that guidance. I mean, that's not an insignificant amount. And if you look into that report more, not only is it China where they tried to emphasize the most, but also their data centers. Their data centers aren't growing as much. And that's a concern because my colleague Aaron, he pointed out that data centers, they should be the backbone of the company. I mean, that revenue shouldn't be as variable as your gaming chips. So I almost feel like while they're trying to put the emphasis on China to make investors feel like, oh, maybe this will change in the near future when we see a turnaround in economic growth in China, this is just a temporary headwind, maybe there's something bigger underneath the covers here.
It's interesting because, and the reason I reacted that way is because you and I were talking this morning about what do companies blame when they miss on their earnings report? And we'll get into this a little bit more later in the show. But, you know, the go-to joke is always about companies blaming the weather. And sometimes that's perfectly valid and sometimes it's not. But I feel like we've seen enough evidence out of China and enough companies talking about China to feel like the economic slowdown is real. Now, to your point, if there's more going on in the case of NVIDIA, then yeah, that absolutely could be a situation where they are taking a number of bad things or a number of challenges that they're facing and lumping them all in China. But China's on the list for them.
Without a doubt. And I don't want to downplay the importance of the economic slowdown in China. It is going to negatively affect a lot of companies. And I'm a huge investor in Chinese stocks. So unfortunately, I'm all too familiar with what an economic slowdown for China means. And NVIDIA also doesn't just have exposure to a general economic slowdown. They have exposure to regulatory hurdles that they're going to face in terms of just the demand for games in China in a regulatory environment that isn't very supportive of gaming right now, especially for the younger generation. So, I mean, there are a lot of headwinds for NVIDIA. I just think whenever I see reports coming out like this, when there is such a drastic change and, you know, they really try to emphasize one point that is a very, very salient point, but then they downplay what could be the larger issue boiling underneath the surface. So without a doubt, definitely has something to do with China, but I also wouldn't, you know, be as lenient as to say that's the only thing affecting NVIDIA right now.
Well, and now we can add this to the list of conference calls that are going to be interesting to listen to and sort of what kind of questions management faces, particularly about the data centers, because obviously There'll be a lot of focus on China as well.